My name's Samara Hand. I'm a Worimi and Biripi woman and a lecturer at UNSW Law Justice, and I research education law and policy, looking at what types of laws and policies we need to ensure a just and equitable education system, particularly for Indigenous peoples. So in terms of who's being excluded, we know that the numbers of suspension are just generally increasing. So last year we saw 1 in 10 secondary school students in New South Wales being suspended. But then when we look at more of the demographics, we can see that Indigenous students and students with a disability are more likely to be suspended. So Indigenous students are 2.6 times more likely to be suspended than their peers, and students with a disability are 2.4 times more likely to be suspended than their peers. So there's a disproportionate application and use of suspension for those marginalised students. So when we look at the research on what's driving the increasing number of school exclusions, we know that it's a number of systemic factors. It's not just about a student's individual behaviour. So when we look at the research, we see that things like poverty, trauma in the home, lack of resources in school, or teachers that don't necessarily have the right training to identify students that need additional support, and also an underfunded and under-resourced education system mean that students are more likely to engage in the types of behaviour that are leading to suspensions and expulsions. But we also know from the research that suspension and expulsion is not an effective behaviour management tool. So the reason we should be investing and thinking seriously about these alternatives is because there's significant cost-saving benefits that we can achieve. So the average cost of keeping a student in a New South Wales government school is around $10 per day, while the cost of keeping a young person in a youth justice centre is around $2,750 per day. And that is 257 times more expensive to keep a young person in youth justice centre than it is to keep them in school. We want to ensure that schools are a place of belonging and inclusion for everyone, and a place of safety, and we need this kind of shift in order to achieve that, because education is a right for every child and young person. It is not a reward for good behaviour. When we look at the examples that we've considered in the research of the different case studies we've conducted, one of the kind of central themes is ensuring that we have trauma-informed and culturally sensitive wraparound support for students and young people to be able to address some of those systemic factors and provide the support necessary to keep students in school, and also to provide the supports and training for teachers and school leaders in able to provide that kind of inclusive environment. So for example, one of the case studies that we looked at was Alternatives Chicago in America, where they work intensely with schools over a 2-year period to provide training both to teachers and also to students on how to have restorative kind of conversations and embed restorative practices in the school, where the focus is around ensuring relationships are maintained and strong rather than on punishing students and by suspending them.